the north face of the Eiger. In 1936, many had dreamt of climbing that seemingly impossible rock wall before, but no one was able to complete the route. The tragedy was in the air, as many had already lost their lives trying to climb the Eiger, but 4 climbers were determined to conquer that peak. What started as a mountaineering expedition, though, ended in a battle for life or death, and profoundly shook the world of mountaineering. The Eiger is a 3,967-meter mountain of the Bernese Alps in the mountainous region of Oberland, Switzerland. Its north face seemed for many years an unsolvable alpinistic problem, and its peak remained unclaimed until 1858. The main difficulties that even the most skillful alpinists weren't able to overcome were mostly of the environmental type. In fact, because of its north exposure, the sunlight rarely touched the wall, causing numerous areas to have perennial snow and ice. These factors, combined with the unpredictable weather and treacherous terrain of the Swiss Alps, made the climb a real challenge. On July 18, 1936, Tony Kurtz, Andreas Hintertweiser, Willi Angerer, and Eddie Rainer set off to the north face of the Eiger. The climbers were all members of the Bavarian Mountaineering Association and had extensive experience climbing in the Alps, but they knew that the Eiger would be a challenge like no other. The one goal they had in mind was to be the first ones to complete the first ascent of the Eiger's north face via a challenging and technical climb, the Hackmer route. The climb started well, with the team encountering good weather and proceeding according to schedule. They had made good progress, and by the evening of the first day, they had reached a ledge known as the Death Bivouac, a small, exposed platform that is situated on a steep slope. Despite the danger, they decided to spend the night there. Next morning, re-energized by a night of sleep, the 4 climbers resumed the ascent of the Eiger's north face, only to face the harshness of the Swiss climate. Wind started to blow and the visibility decreased, making the climb even more difficult. The 4 climbers, though, determined to finish what they started, pressed on, and by the end of the second evening, they had reached the summit ridge. However, disaster struck when it was least expected. As the team made their way across the ridge, a rockfall grazed the group, hitting Willi Angerer and injuring him in the end. Climbers, having gone this far, decided to continue climbing, a decision that would ultimately cost them their lives. On the 3rd day of climbing, the weather was still as bad as the first day, and as the condition of Angerer worsened, the group decided to retreat, defeated by nature. Going back the same way they climbed up, the 4 alpinists had to face an unexpected problem. The difficult passage they were able to climb upwards was impossible to cross the other way around. The climbers, fatigued by 3 days of climbing in bad weather and stranded on the wall, decided to go down following another route. They decided to abseil from the lower lip of the first ice field, down the vertical face. A ledge ran along the wall of rock, which, if they could get to it, would lead them to an entrance to a train tunnel. This new route was far more direct to the ground, but because of this, it was also way more exposed to avalanches and rockfalls. The climbers took the risk, as they had no other options left. Halfway down the descent, contact was made with a railway guard at the nearby railway station. During their exchange, the climbers amazingly said that everything was alright. They were probably feeling close to safety, but things were about to take a turn for the worse. If you've come this far, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, as this would greatly help me. But back to our climbers. While they were preparing for a descent, the group was hit by an avalanche. Andreas Hintertweiser, not clipped to the other climbers, was dragged away by the unstoppable force and weight of snow. The other 3 were luckily tied together and were hooked to the rock wall with a rock nail. However, this was not enough, and the snow dragged the other climbers out of the group down too. Angerer and Kurtz fell along the rock wall, while Rainer, with a sudden shift in weight distribution caused by a fall of his partners, got dragged upwards and brutally crushed against the rock. While falling, Angerer hit a rock ledge, instantly dying from the hit. Rainer, still tied to the top of the line, died a few minutes later, asphyxiated by the body weight of his team members, hanging on the lower end of the rope. Out of the 4 climbers, Kurtz was the only survivor, hanging on the rope with his dead comrades. Tony Kurtz screamed over the top of his lungs for help, getting heard by the railway guard with whom they had spoken a few hours before, who called for help farther down. The rescue team was composed of Hans Schlonegger and the 2 brothers, Christian and Adolf Ruby, and with a special train they headed to the tunnel, where they began to climb up the wall. The 3 rescuers managed to reach a point just 100 meters below Kurtz, but they could not proceed farther because of the terrible weather conditions. Despite Kurtz's desperate cry for help, the 3 had to tell him that they would be coming back the next day, leaving him stranded on the naked rock. On July 22, the rescue team, with the addition of Arnold Glathard, went back to the wall, and thanks to the improved weather, they managed to reach a ledge just 40 meters below Tony Kurtz. Tony had survived the night, but he had lost his left glove, and the entirety of his left arm was frozen. The team couldn't go higher than that. The wall was extremely smooth, and the lack of holds made it impossible to climb. The only solution for Tony was to descend by himself to the rescuer's height. Kurtz was able to cut the rope holding him to his dead team members, and he managed to climb up the starting ledge. His rope was a few meters short of reaching the rescue team, so he decided to separate the single wires of the rope to reach his saviors. This trick worked, and the rescuers were able to give him a new rope and new climbing material. Unfortunately, the rope was too short, and to make one of the right length, Kurtz had to tie together two short ones. Clipped to his harness, Kurtz began to descend once again. Unfortunately, when the junction between the two ropes reached the carabiner at the top of the wall, the tragedy happened. The knot, too thick to pass through the carabiner, blocked the abseiling in the middle of the wall. Kurtz had no ledges to go to and no way to go up or down. For hours he desperately tried to get the knot unstuck, but in vain. After several hours he was starting to lose consciousness, and the rescuers had only been able to touch the ends of his crampons with an ice axe. But it couldn't help Kurtz in any way. With his life hanging on a rope, Kurtz's last word broke out of his mouth. "I can't go on anymore." Said this, Tony Kurtz took his pocket knife and severed the only thing keeping him attached to his life, the rope, falling down the deadly wall. The 4 climbers' bodies were later recovered by the Swiss rescuers and were given back to their respective families. Eiger's north face remained unclimbed until 1938, when another Austrian and German expedition conquered its peak. Since 1935, at least 64 climbers have died attempting the north face, earning it the German nickname Mordwind, literally murderous wall.